Hey everyone. Hello, everybody. It's not even 10 o'clock yet, and it's good to see a lot of people here. I am actually waiting here with my cat Clyde, who has spent the past 5 minutes. Literally, I have beautiful papers lined up all over here so that I can have a really good, important um, eh, interview with General Hertling, and he has literally just crawled all over the papers and moved them about. Um, we're going to be doing a little bit of vamping this morning because, as you know, it's been Mark Hertling has been my guest, has been scheduled to be my guest for a while now. He is wrote a book called If I Don't Return, and he's here to talk to um, me about his book. And I'm supposed to come on talk about his book, and of course, President Trump decided to um, bomb and attack Iran this morning. So uh, not only have I been busy catching up on the news, as I suspect you all have been busy catching up on the news, but um, uh, being an expert, Mark Hertling has first spent the morning on MS Now and has then gone over to his um, other job as on the Bulwark. So he is right now, I think, live on the Bulwark. Don't leave; he'll be here. But he said he will join us when he can. So in the meantime, you got me, baby. General Hartling is a wonderful person, and we are lucky to have his voice and knowledge. And I think that's obviously one of the things I really want to say to him when he comes. Um, I, c- uh, I don't know if I'm the kind of person who would have like normally read the memoir of a soldier, but Lieutenant General Hertling is a very, very special person. And his book is not just full of um, important insights into what went on during Desert Storm and uh, Afghanistan and Iran, and basically what it was like to be a soldier in these times. But there he is. Oh,
Hey,
you're amazing. Leanne Townsend just wrote, I love Mark. He is awesome. I just watched the Bulwark live and he should be here soon. So thank you, Leanne. And she made you appear. So I appreciate
well, here's the problem. I was trying to get you on the computer and I couldn't, so I could be a little bit more comfortable. So I tried joining you on the phone and it seems to work. So Marissa, it is great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope you're not just running on fumes at this point because you have been going since you did you hear about this first thing this morning? Because we are here ostensibly. I was saying to everybody to talk about your book, which launches tomorrow. And I was saying what an important book it was to everybody
Yeah.
because, like, I wouldn't say that I'm the kind of person who launches into reading a general's like memoir, but your book has truly moved me, and I really look forward to talking about it because I think it has obviously a lot of important implications for what's going on right now. Um,
Yeah.
and not just
Thank you.
that, and before even all of this, when I was reading the book, I thought, these are just important. Your book has so much to offer about how we look at how our government should lead and how we should lead as humans. So it's really beautiful in that way. I would like to, however, step back for a second and say, you woke up this morning, I woke up this morning, and we'd heard that the president had, and I use president because Congress didn't support it, the president has attacked Iran with the help of Israel. And I just wanted to get your take on what has happened and what we should be thinking as Americans.
Well, I did wake up about 6 o'clock this morning, with I normally silence my phone at night now that I'm no longer working with CNN,
Right,
but I woke up to about 100 messages from MS Now
right.
saying, "Could you join us?" And one direct message from Joe Scarborough saying, "I'm on at 7, please join me." So, I usually get up early so I can do physical training, work out to get
Right,
ready for the day. So I haven't worked out yet. I've had 6 cups of coffee so far and everything's good. But I'm looking forward to this conversation with you, especially about chocolate chip cookies, because those bring about good things when you have these kind of things. But truthfully, yeah, I've been on for a couple of hours talking about conflict and what to expect and what to anticipate. And my first thought when I started scrolling through the messages I had at about 6 a.m.
mhm,
was, "You've got to be kidding me."
right,
It is just. Um, it is contrary, I think, to who we are as a nation to do these kind of things. Those are my personal feelings.
mhm,
I don't understand the strategy of continuing to attack other nations like we are without any kind of approach toward diplomatic solutions, or
mhm,
maybe a rushed approach toward a diplomatic solution. And the thing that I always think about when something like this happens is the men and women who are going into harm's way,
right,
because those are my brothers and sisters, and there's evidently an awful lot of people who are participating in this event that could be harmed.
mhm,
And there's certainly a lot of Iranians, innocent Iranians, who are also going to be harmed. So those are my initial thoughts. Um, but having been in combat zones multiple times,
mhm.
Marissa, I know how chaotic it is, and, those are the thoughts I have, if you're asking. I mean, I was giving a much more detailed, military analyst approach when I was on, TV and also on the Bulwark just now, uh, but those are kind of the internal personal thoughts.
That's why I have you here, right? I think, I actually, one of the things I really took away from your book was the balance between what it means to be a soldier and, in a sense, what it means to be a husband and a father, and I really it's given me a whole new insight into what must be going on in the, minds of our soldiers, and I think our country, for the most part, and not in a good way, um, kind of sees soldiers and the military as people who do things over there, and not necessarily something that we I mean, in the community of soldiers, it's obviously very tightly knit, and but the rest of us are like, "Oh, great, the army's doing something, wonderful," and we don't really have that, the support and, outward support that we should for people who are thrown into harm's way literally right now, it ran seemingly randomly, right? On the whim of a president who was making a deal with Israel, you know? Um, how do you feel about that in general? About
Well, it's interesting. If we when we talk about the book, when we want to talk about the book,
Mhm,
it was originally written because our youngest son. I'll tell that quick story. Our youngest son um, took a journal that I wrote in 1991 during
mhm,
Desert Storm, because I thought I would not return from that conflict, because we were told we would have 50% casualties in our unit because we were part of a reconnaissance squadron, a cavalry squadron in front of a division, and we were way out in front. And at the time, Saddam Hussein had just fought a 8-year war with Iran. He had used chemical weapons against his own citizens. He had the fourth largest army in the world, so it was a dangerous proposition going in, and there was anxiety,
mhm,
and I'd even describe it as fear going into that conflict, especially when you're told 50% of your unit is going to come back as casual, or is going to suffer casualties, and that's death and maiming. So I started writing journal entries from my sons to teach them about life. what I had experienced as kind of a gift in case I didn't come home.
Mm.
Well, I did come home and they were still young, so we threw the journal in a footlocker, and our youngest son pulled it out a couple of years later, 30 years later, and started typing it up. And then presented it to me in Christmas of 2024. Unbeknownst to me, it was his gift to me that he had, put it in a Word document. But then he said to me, he said, "Dad, it was obvious to my brother and I what you were trying to do. You were trying to prepare us for life if you didn't come home." He said, "But now you've had 35 more years of experience and you have a bunch of grandchildren, so write more for them." I don't think he expected me to do that, to be
Mhm.
honest with you, but I did. And as I was writing it, the sights and sounds and smells of not only the desert in 1991, but my additional combat deployments and my life in the uniform kept coming back. And it really turned out to be a gift of love to them. But then I realized there was more to this. It was a tale, as you just said, of family life in the military and the demands and the challenges and the joys and the
Right.
ability to see different cultures. But it also, Marissa, and this was kind of a minor point, but I'm seeing it more and more now. Um, as I worked on CNN as an analyst for 10 years, my main job was to provide information about what the military does to an audience that don't know.
Mhm.
Less than 1% of our nation serves in uniform. So that means 99% are mostly supportive. A great
Mhm.
percentage of them are supportive, but they really don't understand it. So the book is, and I know you read it already,
Mhm.
hopefully gives some tidbits of information, some very deep and personal reflections, but also some craziness about MREs and chaplains and those
Yep.
kind of things. And it's all over the landscape. So when you are trying to inform people of the dynamics of what happens not only in the military but especially in combat,
Right.
it's very difficult to really share those kinds of experiences like I did this morning without having a personal bias about what is happening.
Right. And one of the things I read in one of your bios, and I think it's also in and then you also discuss it in the book, is you were in charge of, and forgive me if I get the number wrong, like 40,000 troops at one point, but you also were in charge of their families. And you
Yeah.
talk about in the book, probably for me, one of the most moving parts, aside from the part about your dog, and that chapter is the chapter I didn't read. I'm sorry, I don't mean to like make jokes about this, but oh my gosh, poor Misty. But anyway, um, you talk about suddenly being told we're going to be deployed for longer, and it's like, hey, you go over back to Germany and tell the families.
Yeah.
And what that was my dog. Um,
Yeah.
what was it like for you to have to do that, and why is it so important? I say asking a sort of simple question, but why is it so important to keep these families in the loop? And what do you think is going on now with soldiers and their families who woke up this morning?
Yeah. Well, the story behind going back to Germany, we had been in Iraq for 12 months, our 12-month deployment. We were
Mhm.
getting ready to change over with another unit and come home. I was an assistant division commander to my boss and best friend, General Marty Dempsey, who eventually became chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and he was a terrific leader. I was actually away from Baghdad. I was down in the ports literally putting aircraft and Bradleys and tanks on boats to ship them back to Germany. I got a call from him and he said, "Come back to Baghdad." So I flew back, got in a helicopter, flew back. And what had happened is the Secretary of Defense had announced that our tour would be extended and it turned out to be 3 more months, but it was undetermined at the time when we were ordered to stay.
Mhm.
And we were asked to take on a new area because of the Sadr revolt that was going on inside of Iraq at the time. Probably more details than you need. But uh, when I got back and General Dempsey told all his subordinate commanders what they needed to do to get their soldiers back prepared to continue the fight, which was difficult, an extremely difficult leadership challenge for him and for all of us,
Mm,
he turned to me and he said, I want to send you back to Germany to talk to our families for about 3 days. So we've already arranged for a plane. You're going to fly back from Baghdad to, our different, and our division was spread out. A division is about 20,000 people.
mhm,
And we were spread out all over Germany. So the plan was for me to go over a 3 day period to each one of the communities and face the spouses and their family members. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Well, luckily, my best friend, Sue, my wife, said to me, "Hey, don't go in there and talk about, how we got to suck it up and how the soldiers got to complete the mission, all that." She said, "Listen to what they say and answer every single question." Well, the first auditorium or theater that I walked in was in a place called Baumholder, Germany,
mm,
and there were probably 3,000 angry women in that theater, some with their children. And they didn't want to hear any pragmatics or logic about why we were staying. They
right.
just wanted the emotional context. So I think in that one, I answered every single question that was raised, and it took about 3 hours. And I was emotionally drained and I kept answering questions until there were no more questions that were asked. And by the end of that 3 hour period, I think it was 3 hours, um, there was an understanding of what we were trying to do. And I
Mhm,
thank my wife for giving me the great advice of just listening and as opposed to speaking. And it, it was draining, but I also realized as I walked out of the theater, oh my God, I got about 15 more of these to do.
right.
But we did it.
Yeah.
And I think it did the most important thing that you can do in the military, and that's to reinforce trust and reinforce an understanding of, we are all, not only is it the soldier's job to do this mission, but it's part of the family's unfortunate requirement to
Right.
support them. Now, I'll tell you a follow-on story. I'm not. I think I talk about this not in detail in the book. After the third day of doing this, I flew back to Baghdad, and we were in the middle of a new fight. And we had a group of 8 soldiers who were approaching a car. I talk about this, and there was a car bomb. It blew up, and it killed 6 of the 8 soldiers. Now, those soldiers were all from Baumholder, the first place I went, and and 4 of the 6 lived in the same stairwell apartment.
Yeah, I can't
So
forget that part.
so you can imagine the trauma that that created, not only for us to have these deaths of our soldiers, but for the family members who have just been told, "Hey, we're extending." Those soldiers could have been home, potentially. So, those are the kind of things that I don't think the American public truly understand about the dynamics of how
Mm,
much sacrifice our military makes.
right. I think it's a really important point, and I think the other point that comes out of this is how important it is to have strong leadership that listens. And I think one of the important takeaways from your book is how what it means to be a good leader and how you take that into I mean, you have done and you retired from the military and as, and thank you for your service and continued service by showing us what a good leader is, right? And I I wrote down I have so many notes here, and before you showed up, my cat, who is very interested in everything I'm doing, came and walked across all the pieces of paper, and they are now distributed in a completely random and different form.
Good.
So, if I
Let's get random.
so, okay, today we're gonna ask you um, anyway, next time I'll just write it, like, on the cat will find it. Anyway, trust is critical between people, between citizenry of a nation and its government, and between government officials and their army. And that quote to me uh, is so important, especially on a day like today, where Trump has unilaterally seemingly declared war without Congress's approval and is leading troops into directly into harm's way. Um, how do we reckon that kind of leadership? Like, what do we do?
Well, that quote actually is not mine. That's a paraphrase of a guy named Clausewitz.
Oh yeah,
And
that him Clausewitz.
and what he said, not to get too geeky here, but what he said is for any conflict to be successful, you have to have a strong army, a trust between the government and the people's trust in the army as well. Well,
Mhm.
we get that. We get the people's trust through the Congress. They are our
Right.
representatives, and people sometimes forget that. And especially when members of Congress don't stand up to protect the will of the people.
Right.
So there is that triangular disconnect currently in some cases in our government. And truthfully, I'm going to compare it to what happened with Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Mhm.
Russia did not have a good army. They didn't have trust with their people to Mr. Putin, and the military did not have the support of the people. I mean, they sort of did, but that's because of propaganda.
Mhm.
So they are failing miserably. They are not able to pull those three areas of the triangle together to form a will to defend the things that they believe are important. So when we see today, as an example, that uh, we are attacking another country,
Mhm.
no matter how bad that country is, there has to be an argument made by the president to Congress to get the support of the government. And the Congress has to make the argument, or the president has to make the argument to the American people to
Mhm.
get the trust of the people. And I don't think either one of them are there right now, in my opinion. So that means we may have extreme success in conducting kinetic airstrikes and missile strikes all over Iran. But then the question becomes, to what end?
Right.
What is the purpose? What are we trying to do? And are we representing well the majority of the American public in a democracy?
Right. Um, and we have troops, like, I have a friend whose son is on a Navy ship at the moment heading right towards that region. Um, it must be a very unsettling time, she said, using understatement. Um, but
One of the things, if I can, Marissa, because this what you just said is really important.
Mhm.
In my book, I talk a lot about fear and anxiety during personal fear and anxiety during the Desert Storm operation, because
Right.
that was my first taste of combat. And I was concerned about my family, our sons, going home someday, living a life. I was a young guy. I was probably 30 at the time.
Mhm.
And I was really worried about me. It was a driving force, which everyone has that kind of fear the first
Sure.
time they go into combat. What I found later on in my successive tours in Iraq was that change to being more concerned about those I led. And I really learned early on that if it's if it's your time to go, you're going to go. I mean, you're going to get hit with an errant missile strike or
Mhm.
hit with a rifle or whatever, hit with a bullet. But later on, as a leader of a larger organization, it really turned into, I'm accountable for my people. I'm responsible for their safety. I've got to ensure that they come home.
Mhm.
And the hell with me. I mean, not really, but I mean, it's secondary to ensuring people come home. And I tell the story in the book about the young soldier that was the legal assistant who grabbed me outside of a meeting and said, "Are you going to bring us all home?" when we went to Iraq in 2007. And I didn't know how to answer that.
Right.
That's the hard part. So anyway, those are the levels of trust you try and build as you continue on as a leader.
And you also talked about, like, and the other extreme, when, your troops do die, you kept a box. Can you tell everybody about the box that you kept?
I can even show it to you.
Oh my goodness, okay.
It's on my desk here. And I open this box every morning. It looks like this. If I can, you can see it says on the front, "Make it
Make it
matter."
matter. Yeah.
And on the inside, and let me put the phone down a second. I can try and manipulate because it's filled with cards. If you can see the cards,
Mhm.
there are 253 cards in here. I'll lift one of them up. This happens to be Sergeant Aaron Burr, Aaron Elat. I'm sorry. Um, I'll show it to you. So every card looks like that. And this was a young soldier that was killed in 2004 during the first time I redeployed to Iraq. Um, and on the back, it talks a little bit about his family. Now, he was, let me see, if I don't really look at the dates, he was 19 years old when he was killed. So that was in 2004. So that would make him, if he were still alive today, he'd be 40 years old. Uh, when I pick one of those cards out after praying for each one of them and their family, what was left behind, I think about what their life would have been like and how many kids they would have had and what kind of job they might have today and how many times they were missed around the dinner table and you know, would they be divorced now and on their second wife? Would they have six kids from their first? All those kind of things.
Mhm.
And that is the cost of war from my perspective. It's not only doing what the nation wants you to do, but it's young men and women who sacrifice, who say, "Hey, I'm signing up to do this. I know what I'm getting into, and I'm willing to put my life on the line for my fellow citizens." Um, that that to me is what should be the first consideration whenever the nation decides to go to war.
Yeah, I agree with you. Um, I think also I said, like, with, like, tears in my eyes, I think one of the other things you said in your book was, "You don't trust people who don't cry." And
Yeah,
you can
that's
trust
true.
me. Um, I
I think I also said in the book that my wife accuses me of crying at supermarket openings when I get emotional, but, you know, it's one of those things that happens when you're old and you've seen a lot of life.
yeah, I cry when trains leave the station because I think, "Oh my gosh, who's on it and who's leaving?" But
Yeah.
that I don't wanna take away from that box, which the fact that you were able to show it to us and that you look at it every single morning and imagine is, um, thank you for doing that. You
Well,
made
if I can give credit,
Mhm,
the mantra that's engraved on the top, "Make it matter," was General Dempsey's thought. And he has an explanation for that because when we would go to memorial services for our soldiers, you know, after they were killed and their bodies were departed, but we would get the unit together and do a memorial service. He didn't know what to say to the soldiers, you know, when they would come up to him. And finally, you know, he determined that the phrase "make it matter" says it all. Go back out and do something that makes it matter that this guy sacrificed his all, this guy or gal. And the reason it's important to me still today, you know, 15 years after my last deployment, is it speaks to us as a nation
mhm,
to make it matter. What are you doing to make our nation and the world better?
right,
And that's what I think about every morning when I open look at the mantra at the top, and then open up and see those who sacrifice. Is how do you do something good for those around you and to make your nation a little bit better?
mhm. Um, a very, poignant, memory on a day like today where we've all been woken up to sort
Yeah.
of for most of us, I think it has, stunned us. Um, do you do you think that, w how do you feel that people were surprised by this moment this morning?
I certainly, yeah. And if they weren't, they should have been.
Mhm. Um,
I mean, even though this has been a topic of conversation over the last couple of weeks, you know, the president didn't mention it at all in his State of the Union address. He had a brief comment about it, I
it was
think,
in
in the
passing, yeah.
State of the Union. but it was a surprise to everyone. Now, the claim is going to be, well, that was for operational reasons. We wanted to keep it secret. Yeah, but that's not how a democratic nation goes to war.
Mm-mm. And I think, yeah. Uh, y you talk, I wanna talk a little bit more about your feelings about leadership, because I think it all does point to what we're seeing today, and for me personally, this is my personal view, a lack of real leadership, right? I'm my father served in the military. I am by no means I don't know if I have the right to say any of this, but, so to me, I think leadership is really what matters right now, and you talk, about how important it is not just in the military, but in everything that we do in our lives, and I think so much of the book resonated with me because these aren't you didn't just talk about why all these points about leadership and faith and gratitude, which are points that I want to make before I let you go off this morning, but, um how important they are to just sustain us as people right now in a time where I think all of us as citizens feel very turned upside down, and kind of you see what happens in Minnesota, and you see what's just happening in our own communities. A girl kind of taken from her dorm at Columbia, people who work in a restaurant down the street absconded with, and a president who seems not to be following the Constitution. And we wonder, what can we do about this? How do we keep on with our day? I with our daily life and still mean something and still function, because I think a lot of us get so overwhelmed by what's happening right now. Those of us who pay attention to our government and what we do as a country, and your words about leadership I thought were key. And some of them were like, to be a good leader either by ourselves or to look to someone who's a leader, you say they should, she said, I say this humorously because I just spoke for 5 minutes straight. Someone who listens before they speak. Um, and someone who is firm without being arrogant, and someone who demonstrates character through character, values, and all demonstrates it through action. And h how do we use this for ourselves on the day-to-day? Can you help us with that?
I think I can because I try and teach it, during leadership classes
Mhm.
at the MBA program where I work, and it's fascinating that, our students are asked to go into this leadership course as their very first course, and they're confused about, "Why are we doing leadership in an MBA program?"
Yeah.
And they soon realize that everything is based on how you lead, on your character, on your business ethics, and on both your professional and personal values. And I think to answer your question is how do we do this as a
Mhm,
nation today? It's really do a self analysis of how is your character represented? How is who you are represented in how other people see you?
mhm,
What are your values? What kind of things are important to you that help you make great decisions? There's a lot of companies, and I bring this point up in the MBA program. There's a lot of companies that have their values plastered all over the wall, and then we do a case study of how many companies have failed because they violated their own professed values. Well, the same is true for people.
mhm,
If you have a value that you wanna be humble and you're arrogant and your ego takes over, then you're failing to meet your own values. But then I'll take it a step higher because you ask, from the country's perspective,
mhm,
we have values. We have national values. They are stated in our founding documents. They are repeated in speeches throughout our history. I have a dream, the Kennedy's inauguration, the FDR's For Freedom, the Gettysburg Address.
mhm,
The values that we hold dear have to do with respect for one another, equality of all men and women, the freedom that we strive to achieve, the goodness that we try to portray.
mhm,
Those are our American values. and yet I don't hear a lot of people talking about what we believe in other than, the waving of the flag and patriotism and freedom and, all those kind of things. Yeah, those are important, but we've got to have a set of personal values first. And in order to have those personal values, we also ought to basically live by what our nation says we represent. And I think that's where we're having problems right now. We're having some challenges with character
Mhm,
and presence and integrity and humility across the board.
mhm.
Uh, I'll tell a quick story about humility. There was a football coach in some major university. I won't name the name. I do know it, but I won't mention it. Who had a player that he recruited, and there was a rule on the team, or a believed rule on the team, that when players caught a pass or scored a touchdown, they couldn't conduct the end zone swagger and the spiking of the football. That was the rule. So one of the players, who was a highly touted recruit, came up to the coach and said, "Coach, I don't understand this. Everybody else is doing. Why can't we spike the football and do the end on dance?" And he goes, "Oh, no, no, no. You can do that if you want. But if you do that, I'm also gonna ask you to do the same thing every time you drop a pass or fumble a ball." So it's the understanding that swagger isn't important. Humility and excellence is, at least in my view, it is. So I've talked for a long time too, and I'm sorry. But
No,
going back to your comment about talking for too long, which I often do, my
the difference
dad.
is I asked you to speak.
Yeah,
I
well,
asked you a question, and you have a lot
my
of experience to share with us, you know?
yeah. Well, my dad once told me that the good Lord gave us 2 eyes and 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and we
Yeah.
should probably use those in that, in that ratio, but I often fail in doing that too.
Well, at least it's you speaking. Yeah, I think patriotism goes way beyond just I'll say this in my sort of snarky way, um, putting a red, white, and blue pocket square in your blazer.
That is snarky but appropriate because it's, in my view, disgusting.
Yes,
Okay.
even if your socks match. Um, to kind of take it down to something, really basic for us all, I know that faith has been really very important to you as a person and has, um, kind of maintained you along the way, but I think no matter and that you have seen in your world, you work with everybody from every different religion, have worked with chaplains of all, stripes, um, and you said this, and I shall quote you. I think it's you, I don't think it's Clausewitz, but I
Okay.
know that he was very important in your learning at West Point. Um, "I don't believe we have it all figured out. We just need to keep asking, seeking, believing, and living like it matters." And if Clausewitz said that, let me just say, good
He
on
didn't.
him. He did
That
not.
one's me. That
That's
one's
you.
me.
Um, why how does your faith sustain you that way? And even for those of us who might be agnostic or atheists, I think it's still a very moving statement.
I think that may have come from the chapter about culture, if I'm correct.
Mhm.
And what I try to portray, and I have to give a backstory to this, Marissa, to your listeners, is when I went off to West Point as an 18-year-old, I had never been on an airplane before and had never left the city of St. Louis. So everything was new to me. When I landed at LaGuardia and went into the city to stay overnight before taking a bus up to the academy, it was like, "Holy crap, this is wild," And then walking the streets of New York in 1971 was an interesting dynamic too.
Wow.
Uh, but then, when I went off into my military career, and even as a cadet, I met all sorts of great people. Cadets come from every state in the union and most of our territories. Now they come also from some international countries. Um, and it was fascinating to meet from a kid from St. Louis having a roommate from Long Island, and then another roommate from Texas, and then another roommate. who was an African American, and so on and so on. And what I realized early on, and it stayed with me through my career, is the cultural experiences of meeting new people and asking them questions and hearing their stories. By last count, I have been to 123 different countries. And in each one of them, I've really tried my best to find out about the culture and to learn who they were and what they believe in. Along with that has come, and I think this is to your point, is an understanding of different religions and different faiths.
Mhm.
Having been to a couple of Jewish Shabbats and Rosh Hashanah celebrations, having in Iraq, I spent some time during Ramadan with my counterpart there,
Mhm.
seeing Greek Orthodox, seeing Buddhists, talking to people who were Sikhs,
Mhm.
and hearing about their beliefs. And I just think it's fun. It just opens your eyes to how cool the world is
Mhm.
with all these different cultures. And yet it seems there's a place at Gettysburg called Little Round Top. And I'm riffing here, so if I'm talking too long, stop me.
Nope.
But there's this place at Gettysburg called Little Round Top, and anybody that knows anything about the battle thinks that a guy named Chamberlain really saved the Union on the backside of the hill. Well, there was another guy by the name of Patty O'Rourke on the front side of the hill. Patty O'Rourke was class of 1862 from West Point. He was the first Irish American, and Irish Americans during that time were not treated very well coming into our country.
No.
We as a nation have a habit of not treating our newest immigrants all that well. And yet, Patty O'Rourke was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions on the front side of Little Round Top, while Josh Chamberlain was fighting on the backside.
Mm.
Patty O'Rourke, I said, was class of 1862. He was not only an Irishman, he was a really smart Irishman because in 1861, he petitioned the superintendent at West Point to release his class early so they could go fight in the war. And that was because Patty was not a very good student and he wanted to get the hell out of there. So there's all kinds of lessons to be learned from Patrick O'Rourke, and his leadership of the Irish Brigade out of New York.
But what a really important point about, being ahead. That was very smart of him, being ahead of the game and circumventing his bad grades, but also really the point about how we treat our immigrants,
Yeah,
um, through history, right?
yeah,
Um, and it's a lesson we forget over and over and over again.
right.
Uh, I have, you also
Yeah,
talk about.
can I tell you one of my favorite things to do today?
Yes, please.
When I travel around the country and get in an Uber, I always ask the Uber driver where they're from, and all of them are immigrants, and all of them have the courage to come to this country, probably with not a whole lot of money in their pocket, and they're
Mhm.
contributing. And they're sending money home to get their spouse or their children here to the country too. I think that's pretty great. I don't oppose any of that at all. That's what has made America, the unified country that it is, so many different people contributing.
Right, and I think the word contributing is the one that people often seem to forget because they're contributing so much. They have children too that they're sending to school. I get the pleasure of teaching some of them and learning from them. I know it sounds corny, but it's true. Over at Montclair State, where my students are often first generation in this country, first generation going to college, and it it gives me a lot of hope about what's coming next, but unfortunately, people get stuck in this moment of what they're new and they're taking from us and it's like, no, they're contributing, right?
Yeah.
They're educating their children to become the next journalists, the next doctors, the next accountants even, you know?
And they love who we are as a nation,
Right,
or better yet, they love who we aspire to be as a nation.
right, and they still hold that in their heart, and I think that's, important. Um,
Yeah.
you, one more quote from you is, I have lots of them all over the place. Don't, this one is about gratitude, and that's it. It's a my cheap segue into being grateful to you. Don't underestimate the value of reaching out. Gratitude, after all, is not just something you feel; it is something you give, and if I believed in tattoos, that would be something that I would want to remind myself of every day, and I would want all of us to do it. I I have a lot to be grateful to you about because a few years ago, just as the Ukraine war started, you came on my podcast and we were talking, I think, about the what the spring campaign would be like for the Ukrainians and how dire it could possibly be. And we talked about that. And then, as is the way on the Secret Life of Cookies podcast, The Strange Way, I manage some sort of segue between that and cookies. So call me the segue queen or really bad at it. I don't know, but one of them. And I started talking to you about chocolate chip cookies and chocolate chip cookies. And I really like, as I say this, as I said it, your whole demeanor went from Lieutenant General Mark Hertling to Mark Hertling, dad who likes cookies. And
Chocolate chip
I mean,
cookie
I don't mean
eater.
to, and it's on video, people, so you could see this too. And you started talking about your best, well, also makes me like choke up, your best friend, Sue, your wife, and her chocolate chip cookies, and how you'd just been at Thanksgiving, I think, at your children's house. You're like, my wife packs all the ingredients for chocolate chip cookies with her. So the minute we hit the ground, they can have not just chocolate chip cookies, but the right ones, and how they'd eaten them all and left you none, which I still think is rotten. And I hope that has been made up since then. But you inspired me. And I went on from that to write an entire book about a cookbook about chocolate chip cookies, The Secret Life of Chocolate Chip Cookies, because if a cookie like that can have an impact on a man like you of your stature, and seriousness, then it must be a pretty amazing kind of cookie. And so I thank you very, very much for that. I am grateful to that. And I also want to point out to people that chocolate chip cookies have had an incredible role in supporting our troops. In fact, they became well known from being like this nice cookie that this woman made at the Toll House Inn in Massachusetts to being a popular food all around New England, to becoming America's most popular cookie because
Right.
housewives or wives from Massachusetts especially would send care packages of this new cookie to the soldiers abroad during
Right.
World War II,
Right.
and they would share them. I mean, no matter how hard and dry they would be. My father used to talk about um, doing bayonet practice on the fruitcakes that would arrive from the kind ladies of Danbury, Connecticut. It was like, we weren't
Yeah.
going to eat it, but darn.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was great for bayonet practice. But chocolate chip cookies are not, no matter how crunchy. Um, and the word spread from soldier to soldier. I have in my book a clip from a letter from a soldier from outside New England who was like, "Mom, you got to try these cookies. You know, make these for me when I get home." So, I am grateful to you and soldiers everywhere for their love of chocolate chip cookies.
Well, I have to tell you a follow-on story and tell your listeners this too, that Marissa was so nice that she sent me a copy of her book. And it had a sweet note on it to my wife, and it came in the mail. I didn't know what it was. I opened it up and I said, "Oh, this is for Marissa. This is great." And I showed it to Sue and I told her the story of how I relayed what she did for our grandchildren. And she said, "This is awesome." And she started thumbing through it. And as only Sue, and you don't know my wife, but she's 4'11" and I'm 6'4", so she's this little powerhouse of a person. So she's all happy and she's thumbing through this, and then suddenly she turns to me and she put her hand on the hip, and I know something bad is about to happen. Then she goes, "Hey, wait a minute. Is this to tell me to change my recipe with all these other cookies?"
No, 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 no.
No, she was teasing. She was teasing a little bit, and I said, "No," and we laughed about it, but she said, "This is so sweet." So, we both sent you a note, and, we have that chocolate chip cookie in our kitchen, chocolate chip cookie book in our kitchen with all the other recipe books that she has, and it's a favorite of ours.
Well, that's very, very sweet of you, and I thank you for inspiring an entire cookbook. You know, you've done a lot of great things in your life, but you inspired a cookbook too.
That's the best. That's the best right there.
Oh, do you have, just a word or 2? I think you probably have been up, you probably actually need to go work out, work off those 6 cups of coffee. I know I do. Um,
My wife is gone this weekend with the grandkids. She's looking after the grandkids in DC. So, if she was here, I'd leave this conversation and say, "We need some chocolate chip cookies."
well, you know where the cookbook is, and chocolate chip
Yeah.
cookies are easy to handle. You can do it. I believe in you.
Okay.
If you
Okay.
can lead 40,000 troops, you can probably make chocolate chip cookies.
Okay.
Um, okay, so we are 14, 15 hours into the bombing of Iran. We have seen school bombed. We have seen, I don't know what other things have happened since I last watched the updates. What are your words to us as Americans right now in how we move forward and what we do, not just for ourselves, but also each other?
Um, yeah, I actually gave a speech on that topic last weekend at the Principal First conference, and where where there's a lot of people proclaiming we've got to find ways to get back to who we were.
Mm,
I'm not sure that's ever going to happen. Uh, but the only alternative to that is to get back to something better.
mm,
Whenever you're in a crisis or in a chaos situation, and we are certainly in both of those right now. Um, I was once told by a great mentor of mine, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And the intent of that statement is to try and find ways to come out of it differently with some new knowledge. Well, I think the way we come out of this series of events that we've been subjected to over the last year, and maybe even some that had occurred years before that,
yep.
is to take stock of who we are and who we really want to be. And it goes back to that conversation we just had a minute ago about character and values and ethos. Um, and i- i- we as a people are often pumping our chest, beating our chest, and proclaiming how great we are. I think it's time for a little bit more humility and a little bit more self-assessment of who we are, who we appear to be, and if that matches who we really want to be. So that's how I believe we address these situations. We have to stay steady, understand that we can't let a good crisis go to waste, and think of ways to come back better
Mhm.
uh, uh, than what we even were before, and we can do that. This is the equivalent of going to war, I think. Um, and whenever you come out of a war, you realize how much is at stake, and it really it causes your vision to narrow and
Mhm.
to really focus on the right things. So that's what I would say.
I thank you for that. I think it's important on the large scale and also kind of in our hearts too.
Right, right.
Um, I am very grateful to you for being here this morning. I'm very grateful, and I think everyone who has been here this morning is also grateful for all your insights and also your caring, your compassionate self, kind of being the leader that you are, helping us in this very strange moment. And I hope everybody will read your book because, as I'll just repeat again, it's called If I Don't Return, and it's available starting, I think, tomorrow, but you can always, right? And,
You can order it right now from, Ballast Books, and you'll get it in a day or 2 with a signature.
oh,
It is released on March the 10th from Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles and all the independent bookstores, but if you ordered it from Ballast right now, you'd get it quickly. It will be out in audiobook and electronic version too when it goes on the Amazon, page, but, if I can just say this, Marissa, I had a conversation with the publisher when I went down to sign all the books. And he said, this isn't really a war book. And I said, I didn't mean it to be a war book. I said, it's a book about life centered around conflict. And he said, well, he said, I'd put it a different way. And he said I was a Marcus, he said I was a equivalent to Marcus Aurelius. I was a real stoic. And I've
mhm.
never heard that before because I am not a stoic. But he said, this is a book about family and leading and character, and then it's about the military. And that concerned me because I've never wanted to write a leadership book, because there's too many of them out there, and they're usually all about the person who's writing it. And this isn't, as you know, book isn't about me, other
Mhm,
than that I'm telling the story. It's about how other people address the things in their life,
mhm.
especially crises that occur, and how they deal with their family in those crises. So, thank you for having me on, and I appreciate you hawking my book a little bit. And it's been fun to talk to you.
It's been really fun to talk to you, and I really mean it when I say that this book is a moving book that really was so necessary, to me at this time in sort of like resetting myself as far as what I'm grateful for, what faith means, and I know you don't want it to be a leadership book, but there's a sort of personal leadership, and those are the things that I take away from it. So I thank you very much, and
Thanks, Marissa.
talk to you soon. And I'm
Okay.
sorry I can't make you a cookie. I owe you dozens.
All right. All of your listeners should stay calm. We're going to be fine. We'll be better after this. Okay.
I like that, and thank you very much for your service, for your book, and thank you to everybody who's shown up today. You can this will be available on video. I shall repost it, and I thank you all for being here today, and thank you especially.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.